When I'm asked to do workshops, a lot of times I'm asked about doing performance management workshops. It's something that I see all the time with employers and managers and supervisors that managing others' performance is not an easy thing. It is awkward, it can be uncomfortable. Sometimes we put it off. We think we can leave it all until our annual performance review. And a lot of talk there's been a lot of buzz the last few years about saying, well, we're not going to do an annual performance review. We don't have to do that anymore. People say you don't do that. And there is a lot of discussion about that, and there's good value in that advice. But what the other side of it is that you're not to hold everything in until an annual performance review. So, in that way, when you hear performance reviews are outdated now, annual reviews are outdated, really it means that it's not that you shouldn't do them anymore because they have great value in their documentation, putting them on the employee file. But instead, we should be looking at them as one documentation component out of a year long, interactive, highly engaged, lots of feedback type of a relationship. So, on a day to day basis, for a manager to say, you know what, you're doing a really good job on that. Or conversely, I see what you've done there and I know where you're coming from, but what I've found works better is XYZ. Or I noticed that you don't seem to be putting in much effort in working with your coworkers. Can we talk about that? So rather than saving up all those little pieces until the end of the year, the idea is that you make your performance management system be one that gives feedback immediately, is very specific, so that you can say, yesterday I saw this, or today I noticed that, rather than waiting till the end of the year and then the employee gets a big surprise not knowing that there was a problem with their performance at all through the year, and then a big surprise, and you're disappointed with them. They're disappointed because they could have done things better before that, but nobody gave them the opportunity. So, one of the biggest reasons that people hold off on giving performance reviews is that it's not that fun. So, let's look at a couple of the pieces that I like to consider when I talk to employers about doing performance management. Performance management can consist clearly of 5 different steps. So, first off, we have to decide what the issue is, decide what performance expectations we have, decide what that job should be doing and to what standard. Those are really basic things, but we forget to do those sometimes because we think, well, we know what we want. Everybody knows what that job should be. No, not everybody does. So then, when you've decided, okay, this is what it should be, this is how they're not meeting the standard. So now what do? We have to prepare for a discussion. This is because these discussions do not come naturally to most people. Telling somebody else that they're not doing a good job and yet knowing that you're going to have to work with them every day from there on out can be really difficult. So, really prepare how you're going to have a discussion about performance. And with that, what I always tell clients is don't just have it prepared in your head, but also write down notes for yourself. Once you get into a conversation, it's really easy to start feeling like you're hurting somebody's feelings and you start to backpedal. And then at the end of the conversation, you both walk out of there with two very different perceptions of what happened. And that's where you come to the discussion. Talk to your employee. You have your pieces laid out, you've prepared for it, you've got the right setting. It's just you and that person, or you and another supervisor and the employee. Something that's really thought out, planned. You're not in the middle of the coffee shop. You're not bringing something up in front of somebody in front of their peers. Not in a staff meeting, not in a passing by saying something flippantly, but you have an actual discussion. A friend of mine says, that's what the HR answer is. You have to have the discussion. And it's so true. So when you have the discussion, make sure that you've got your notes so that you know what you want to target, how to explain it, and so that you don't backpedal and come out of the conversation thinking, oh, I forgot this, that, and the other thing. I can't believe that I couldn't remember. And then you go away frustrated. The employee leaves having no idea what the meeting was about because nothing was really said. So make sure that you plan out what you're going to say. And then before the discussion's over, go through your checklist. And then ask them, does this make sense? Is that clear? What's our plan going to be going forward? So have them involved in that. Otherwise, you're just dictating, and quite often people don't buy into that. But tell them, I'm having this discussion with you because I want you to succeed. I want to see you do really well in this job because I know you have it in you. So those are some little tips as to how to have those discussions. Another one that quite often people forget is to evaluate. So, how is it that you are going to, after you've had this discussion, how are you going to determine if that person's kept up doing a good job? If they've corrected behavior or performance, if they're working better, how are you going to say, yeah, that discussion was effective? What's the return on that investment of time and effort? So you really want to look at how are you going to evaluate, and does the employee understand how you're evaluating their performance going forward? A lot of employees fail because they don't know what the expectations are. And typically that's because the employer doesn't explain it well, because we know in our own heads what we want to say, how we want it said, how we want a job done, but we don't do a very good job sometimes but we don't do a very good job explaining how those things are to happen sometimes. So just be careful about that part. And finally, you now know how you want to evaluate it. What are the key performance indicators? What are the infractions that you're not permitting going forward? So when you think of those things, then what are you going to look at going forward? You're going to look at your evaluation markers and monitor over time. Sometimes we'll have a discussion that's really awkward and we're just looking forward to getting it over with. They go, yep, done. Don't have to worry about that again. I dealt with them. Monitor, check in with them, see how they're doing. Did it make sense? Do you have to adjust your expectations again? Have they been trained properly? Do they understand? All those pieces need to be monitored going forward. And if they're not able to do what you need them to do, if they're not meeting expectations, then you've got another branch to follow. And it could be coaching, discipline, or termination. So we have to keep in mind that monitoring is going to lead down one of those paths. Or you can come back and say, you know what, that's great. I'm really glad to see that you're succeeding now. Excellent. So those are a few of the tips that I wanted to give you. And even when I think about planning, how do you plan what you're going to talk about, what your issue is? Well, one of the things that I tell people is choose your battles wisely. And by that, I mean, think about the situation. And sometimes, we get so concerned because something just drives us crazy. But you might want to step back and say, is this just me? Or is it just a personal thing for me? Is it just a little irritation? Or is it actually impacting the job or their performance? So figure it out. Is it just me or is it them? And is it temporary? Sometimes there's just something going on in somebody's personal life that is a very temporary state. So find out, is this something that's going to be a short-term issue or is this a long-term issue, and how do we need to deal with it from there? Also need to figure out, will someone else deal with it? Sometimes, we're like the ostrich with their head in the sand thinking, oh, no, that's not mine. I don't have to deal with that. Their manager will deal with it. Hopefully, if they have a manager and it's not you, they do have a manager that will take care of things. But when it's your own staff person, sometimes it's up to you to deal with those yucky conversations. And if it's not you that should be dealing with it, if it's not your employee, how do you communicate across departments? How do you work with other managers or supervisors? Or how do you tell your supervisor that your peer has some issues? Or how do you work with that? So there's all kinds of questions, so many angles that you need to consider. And in workshops that I do with my clients and my groups, it's incredible because we can sort through a lot of those questions to figure out who's responsible, when do I need to deal with this, what path do I take? Is it coaching? Um, so is it coaching? Is it discipline? Is it termination? Is it refocusing or reorganizing? We'll also look at doing some practices, maybe some role plays. So, how would you have this conversation? What are your steps? You're thinking this, but what do you think they're thinking? And what are the values deep down that you need to be considering if it comes to they're not performing? Well, why is that? Is there something deeper that you're missing? So it's all about finding out more about your employee and what's going on before you can really figure out how to manage their performance sometimes. So I'll leave it there. Just a few tips that I wanted to go over in a short video, but I'd really love to hear what you're thinking, and I'd like to hear if there's anything of interest or if I'm missing any components. Um, so if I'm missing anything, if there are questions you have, please reach out. I love to engage with the community. And also, if you're interested in a workshop for your workplace, or if you want coaching on how to have these conversations, please get in touch with me. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.